She had worked for 18 months to buy something that belonged to no one else. No shared sticker, no borrowed spare key, no family fingerprints on the hood. The first time she sank into the leather seat and breathed that new car scent, Hollis Venn felt the quiet, private sensation of having finally crossed a line no one could drag her back over. She had done the math, lived on beans and coupons, said no to weekends away, and yes to every late-night revision the firm needed. She had earned the midnight blue sedan the way a mountain earns its shadow. What happened next will shock you, because the paper they forged cut deeper than any key. Sunday dinner at her parents' house had the choreography of a ritual. Her bones remembered even when her mind rebelled. The table glowed under an old chandelier. Mother set crystal. Father checked his watch as if punctuality were a sacrament. And Naomi breezed in with weather in her hair and laughter trailing behind, her like perfume. The roast steamed. The house held decades of speeches disguised as questions, and Hollis could already hear the overture. Where have you been driving that very nice car? Do you really need 2 parking spots? Your sister has an interview next week. It would make such a strong impression if... Naomi slid into her chair, mouth glossy, nails immaculate, eyes catching the light and throwing it back as if it belonged to her. You're not using it most days, she said, not even pretending to mean please. And I've got 3 screenings at agencies in the foothills. One of the assistants told me they judge what you drive. It's not fair to handicap me. It's not fair to take what I earned, Hollis said, and kept her hands flat on her lap instead of clutching the napkin. Father's brow gathered itself like a gavel. Family helps family. Mother set a saucer down just a shade too firmly. Think of it as a bridge, dear, until your sister is established. A bridge was how they named every levy on her life. Hollis tasted the old sweetness of compliance and let it dissolve on her tongue. No, she said. Not loud, not cruel, just the syllable she had starved of sunlight most of her life. Naomi's smile didn't falter, it rearranged. You can ride with us, she said. We'll take a quick scenic detour after dessert. You'll get to see the view before the leaves turn. I'll just test the turn radius. Hollis didn't like the way the sentence wore its own alibi, but she nodded to keep the room from tightening. She could keep her keys in her pocket. She could say no again in the driveway. She could leave if the conversation turned into sentencing. She had learned to build exits into rooms her parents owned. The evening thinned. Steam rose. Forks rang. Hollis answered work questions with polite brevity and ignored the way her promotion was treated like a conversation starter rather than an accomplishment. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. They drove out of town as day's edges browned. Naomi insisted on the driver's seat. Just to feel how it handles, Mother called the foothills beautiful. Their righteousness always found binoculars, and Father narrated the speed limit like a homily. They turned off the state highway onto a road that looked honest enough, then honest and empty, then only empty. Hollis watched her service bars die the way people watch the last house lights in a long valley flick off as the power fails. At a ridge turnout, Naomi eased the car in, killed the engine, and reached toward Hollis for a hug. It was quick, practiced, the way a thief can be tender with a wallet. Hollis felt the brush of wrist against pocket and trapped the hand without thinking. Naomi laughed, pulled back, and in the same breath, Father's hand landed on the interior lock button. The doors clicked. The driver door opened and shut with Naomi's perfume, Mother's door with a clink of bracelets, Father's door with conclusion. Quick look, Father said. The view is restorative. Leave the keys, Naomi added, offhanded as weather. Hollis slid the key fob deeper in her pocket, felt only fabric. She reached behind her spine. The pocket was empty. The absence burned bright as sleet. Naomi's smile held 2 ounces of apology and a gallon of dare. The fob glittered in her hand, blue leather tag catching dusk. We'll loop back, she said, and the sentence rang like a souvenir bell. Mother stepped into her space, soft voice lined with wire. You hate conflict, darling. Let us help. With the parts that snarl. The car started while Hollis stood looking at the place where the fob had been. Tires groaned on gravel. The midnight blue body rolled backward, forward, aimed its nose toward the turn, and swallowed distance. Father's hand lifted, a courtroom farewell. Naomi lifted 2 fingers. The brake lights blinked. Then the car was a shape. Then a color. Then a rumor. And then the sound of it fell off the edge of the ridge like a line someone cut. Silence was a person on that turnout. It stood beside her and watched her figure out what to do. She waited to be afraid. It didn't come. Something else came instead. The old durable engine of her, method and breath. She took inventory. Pack, small crossbody with wallet, a travel-size sunscreen because she was the kind of person who remembered to keep one. A folding, reflective triangle she'd never unfolded. A tube of lip balm. A pen. A receipt for windshield wipers like a joke. No water. No jacket. Shoes sensible, thank God. Cell phone. 1% bar, then no service. She powered it off to keep its tiny light for later. The air cooled as the ridge took more sky. She set the reflective triangle at the shoulder where a driver would not miss it, then stepped back to look at it the way she checked PowerPoints from the back row to make sure the font was large enough. She studied the incline, the way the road leaned and then gave up, found the figure on the milepost, 37. She said it out loud to staple it in her memory. She walked in the shallow stripe of shadow cast by the rock wall and counted to 300, before a rest. Breath in 4s, feet in 3s. She made a rhythm where none wanted to exist. When she found a turnout with the remains of a burned log, she sat and looked at the hills as if they had written this moment and were waiting to see if she'd read correctly. She thought of the email she had silenced earlier in the day, a subject line from the motor vehicle department that looked like a monthly bulletin. She thought of Naomi's wrists. She thought of the long, thin line of her life in which she had always been the person who brought her own scissors to ribbon cuttings only to watch someone else take the bow. A truck labored up the hill and passed. The driver lifted 2 fingers without slowing. She did not blame a stranger for leaving a woman uncollected on a shoulder at dusk. She'd been trained by the world to recognize risk. She opened the phone long enough to check if one bar had wandered within reach, then shut it back down when the screen stayed bald. She walked. She made the shape of forward until the road allowed her a view of a tiny valley where a ranger station would be if the world were kind. It did not appear. But a wire fence did, and beyond it, a rectangle of aluminum that resolved into a trailhead kiosk. The sign held a map behind scratched plexiglass and a list of numbers for emergencies, which made her smile without humor. She pressed her forehead against the plexi anyway, as if osmosis could deliver a dial tone. She rationed her steps the way she had rationed student loan payments once upon a time. Harshly, cleanly, with a promise to pay herself back later. When the grade finally turned downhill, she let gravity loan her a little speed. The sky became less cinematic and more dark. The reflective triangle, 2 miles behind her now, leaned into its own patience. The road's end spit her into an unlit scatter of outbuildings and a single gas station whose canopy hummed like a sleeping insect. The interior fluorescence bleached the shelves into obedience. A bell above the door performed its small duty. The cashier, a man with a wrist tattoo of a mountain that looked close to the one behind him, looked up, took Hollis in, and then took in the not-taking for which he had likely been trained. "Water?" he asked. "Yes," Hollis said, and took the bottle like a sacrament. "And could I borrow your Wi-Fi for a moment? I'll buy the code if you sell it." He tapped the register and slid a small slip toward her with a password that began with the name of a local football team. "We don't advertise it," he said, "but you look like you need to do a thing that matters." She opened the phone. The bars returned like rabbits after a dog is leashed. The screen lit with the backlog of 100 small reminders of modern life. And there, lodged in the river, was the email from the DMV. Subject: Co-owner signature received. Her finger hovered. She looked up at the cashier, who watched her with the polite distance of a man who had seen sobbing at midnight before, but would never assume he was owed an explanation. She opened the email. The body of the message congratulated her on successfully completing a co-ownership signature via the state's e-notary portal. It thanked her for choosing the convenience of digital title updates and invited her to click a link if she wanted to review the documents or the audit trail. Hollis's hands went still and precise the way they did in presentations when the CFO asked the kind of question that made other people drop pens. She clicked. The portal recognized her phone and remembered the times she had paid registration fees like a citizen who believed in systems. After a two-factor verification, she knew she had not requested, pushed to an email address with her name followed by a year she never used. She forced a recovery using her original credentials and an old passphrase about a book character no one in her family had ever read. The audit trail opened. The document showed an e-signature in her name timestamped at 7:11 p.m. It listed a device ID. It listed an IP address. She copied the IP into a lookup and held her breath as if her lungs were a jury she didn't trust to be fair. The city result winked up and then elaborated. The neighborhood where her parents lived, the provider they used, even the sloppy, repeating lease identification for the modem. The system had captured the device's approximate location with the kind of accuracy that makes advertisers blush. Hollis exhaled for so long, her eyes watered. The cashier slid a second bottle of water across the counter without comment. She nodded her thanks, drank, and kept reading. The notary seal image in the packet looked wrong in a way that would have slipped past anyone who does not collect details like freckles. The spacing between the commission expiration and the county line had 0.5 millimeter of arrogance. The journal entry number did not match the sequence an ordinary day would suggest. There was a check mark for ID verified by video, but the state only allowed remote notarization under narrow conditions. The checkbox wore its own guilt. She screen captured everything. She downloaded the whole packet to a cloud folder and duplicated it to a second account, then emailed it to a new address she kept for moments when family might call the first an accident. She texted Linda, friend, witness, harbor, and typed only, "I'm safe. I have receipts." She called a rideshare and wrote in the notes, "Please come even if the road looks wrong. I'll wait at the gas station under the bad lights." The driver arrived with a playlist like Comfort, said nothing except hello, and drove her home through a night that had not been written for kindness, but was trying anyway. Her apartment looked the way she liked her life to look. Intentional, not expensive, except where it mattered, calm. She set the bottles on the counter like trophies and opened her laptop. She made a new folder called Boundaries and smiled despite herself. Inside it, she stacked screenshots like bricks, IP lookup results, timestamp overlays, the e-notary, platform's confirmation email. She printed to PDF. She wrote file names the way lawyers do. She was not a lawyer, but she had sat beside enough of them to learn their weather. When the adrenaline loosened, anger arrived the way a front arrives, slow pressure, then undeniable wind. She allowed it to heat her face and did not apologize. To the empty room. She opened an old email thread with a paralegal she had once helped find a job and typed, "Jenna, I need an ex parte injunction to freeze a vehicle title. Identity fraud plus conversion. Audit trail shows IP from the parents' house. Notary irregularities. Can you help me draft? I'll pay you for your time and bring you all the receipts." The reply came 10 minutes later, at a speed that made Hollis love the working world again. "Send everything. I'll outline the filing and give you a list of exhibits to pull before the clerk opens. We may also want a temporary restraining order preventing transfer or encumbrance." She sent. Jenna sent back a template that looked like a road with mile markers. Hollis filled in blanks with the names of people she loved and could no longer tolerate. She listed facts the way truth likes them: clean, dated, attached. At dawn, she stopped, only long enough to shower and choose the suit that made her look like money had finally learned her name. She printed copies and slid them into a binder that caught the light. At 8:30, she was at the courthouse with coffee too hot and a face that did not invite delay. The clerk wore kindness under fatigue. Hollis handed over her packet, the motion for temporary restraining order, the proposed order freezing any title transfer or co-owner additions pending a hearing. Jenna met her on the second marble step with a hand on her sleeve and a mouth that already knew the docket number. They waited while the judge finished the kind of matter that makes movies boring and lives livable. When called, Hollis stood straight and let Jenna sing in the language Hollis had learned to understand. "Your Honor, we request emergency relief. My client was abandoned without cell service 3 miles from a signal and discovered a fraudulent co-owner addition executed during that window. Exhibit A shows the DMV audit trail. Exhibit B, the IP address tying the signature to the parents' residence. Exhibit C, the notary's irregular seal. Exhibit D, social media posts purporting to announce the sister's gifted car. Exhibit E, phone records documenting lack of service at the time. Exhibit F, an affidavit attesting to the abandonment." The judge read quickly, the way some people eat when they have known hunger. He asked 3 questions that tested the bottom of the story and found it held. He signed the TRO with a pen that looked like it had never failed to work. "Hearing in 10 days, he said. "No transfer, no encumbrance, no operation by anyone not listed on the original title pending resolution. And notify the notary. I want an explanation on the record." They walked out into the rotunda and stood looking at each other like people who had carried a piano down a flight of stairs and set it without dropping it. Hollis texted Linda, "We have a freeze. I'm shaking, but not from fear." Jenna squeezed her forearm. "Next, we tighten the loop. You'll call the notary. Be polite. Ask for the journal line. Ask for ID method. Ask if you ever appeared before her." Hollis nodded and dialed from a number that would not trigger recognition. A voice answered. Warm, hurried, a person in the middle of 3 things. "Hi," Hollis said. "I'm calling because my name appears on an e-notarized document I did not sign. Could you check your journal entry for the title co-ownership? Filed yesterday evening?" There was rustling, a keyboard, a pause. "I don't have you in my in-person journal," the notary said after a moment. "We did it by video." "You met me by video?" Silence found a chair. "I verified the ID uploaded to the platform," the notary said. The sentence wore shoes that didn't fit. "It's allowed for certain transactions. In this state, only under specific circumstances," Hollis said softly. "And only with a recorded session and knowledge-based authentication. Did we do that?" Another pause. The signer answered questions, the notary said, but the verb didn't. "Nowhere to stand. Look, if there's a problem, the platform has logs." "The court would like them," Hollis said, not unkindly. "We have a hearing in 10 days. I'm sending a preservation notice." She hung up and wrote the notice with hands that knew how to keep a tone clean even when carrying a sword. She sent it to the platform and the notary both. She CC'd the DMV's fraud address and the clerk for courtesy. The next days rearranged themselves around discipline. Hollis went to work and did the work. She let colleagues praise her calm without telling them what she was lifting in silence. She drove her old SUV and parked it 2 blocks away so that seeing her space at the office wouldn't make her body think it had been robbed. She slept with her binder under the chair beside her bed, like people in old stories slept with knives. Her parents called. 12 missed calls on Monday, 6 on Tuesday. On Wednesday, a text from mother. "We are worried. Come to dinner. Let's speak as a family." Hollis typed and erased 3 drafts that were mostly weather reports for a storm that deserved a name. She finally sent, "I will attend after the hearing. Please do not contact me about the car in the meantime." Naomi posted a story standing beside the midnight blue sedan in a driveway Hollis refused to recognize. The caption read, "Grateful for family who believes in me." The car's plate was half hidden by an artful angle, but the timestamp matched the hour the judge's order took effect. Hollis clipped the reel, saved it, and did not comment because responding to bait is how people end up hooked. Jenna found a friend at the DMV who liked the idea of systems working. The friend pulled server logs into a human-readable shape and confirmed the IP address. She also sent a screenshot, scrubbed of internal nonsense, showing that the device used for the signature had failed knowledge-based authentication twice before passing on the 3rd try. The questions had been about Hollis's mortgage history. Hollis rented. Someone had guessed at her life and gotten it wrong twice. Linda came over with pasta that steamed like home and wine that made room for sentences to finish. They spread evidence on the table and arranged it with the reverence of people setting instruments before a concert. "They left you on a mountain," Linda said, voice low. "And then they put your name where it had no business being." "They put my signature where my feet couldn't go," Hollis replied. That was the point. She slept that night like someone who had finally found the correct weight for the blanket. Morning came clean. She added one more exhibit, the gas station receipt time-stamped 7:32 p.m., proof she was 5 miles downhill at a register while her signature supposedly flowered on a screen at 7-Eleven. She wrote the math on a sticky note because even obvious, things deserve ceremony. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. The hearing arrived with fluorescent light and the collective smell of paper and patience. Her parents sat 2 rows back on the respondent side. Mother's pearls wound tight at her throat. Father's mouth set as if it had to hold back a lecture or it would fall out. Naomi wore a blazer that pretended not to be new. The notary appeared on a small screen from a remote room with a plant that looked apologetic in the background. The e-notary platform sent counsel with a clipboard and a smile that had practiced sincerity. Jenna went first. She did not waste the court's time. Exhibit A, audit trail. Exhibit B, IP lookup. Exhibit C, notary seal spacing irregularities, and a notary journal that did not contain a live in-person appearance by Ms. Venn. Exhibit D, social posts, and Exhibit E, phone records showing an absence of service at the time of the claimed signature. Exhibit F, the gas station receipt. Exhibit G, an affidavit from the rideshare driver that he collected Ms. Venn miles away at a timestamp inconsistent with her being before any notary's camera, let alone one who failed to produce a recording. The judge's questions were simple. Where was Ms. Venn at 7:11 p.m.? Walking toward a light that would let her open the email telling her she had just signed something she did not sign, Jenna said, not moving her eyes from the bench. To the notary, the judge said, "Did you see the signer's face? In real time?" The notary's mouth tried weather. "Your Honor, the platform populated the information. I relied on that." "That is not an answer to my question," the judge said. "Did you see Ms. Venn's face?" "No," the notary said, very small. To the platform, the judge said, "Produce the recording and the knowledge-based authentication log." Counsel with a clipboard shuffled papers that did not have what he needed. "We are working to retrieve it." "You are out of time," the judge said. "The temporary order is made permanent as to the attempted co-ownership addition, which is void. Title remains in Ms. Venn's sole name. The court finds fraud by a preponderance of the evidence. Restitution to petitioner for legal fees and costs. Civil penalties against respondents to be determined after submissions. The notary's commission is suspended pending review." Mother made a small shocked sound like a crystal catching a nail. Father exhaled through his nose as if the air had offended him. Naomi's jaw shifted once, like a hinge testing whether it would hold. Hollis kept her face in the country, called still. Her hands were not trembling. She looked down at them, as if they belonged to a person she admired. Outside the courtroom, the hallway felt a degree warmer. Jenna's smile was tired and bright. "We'll file for a lien for your time and for the bodywork for whatever happened to the passenger side when she called it a blessing and a harassment cease letter. Also, we can notify the insurer before anyone decides to be creative, Adim." "Like that," Hollis said, and meant something larger. They walked down the marble, and each echo felt like a box being checked in the right order. Dinner at her parents' house later that week happened anyway. Hollis decided to stand in the room where her childhood rehearsed itself and see whether the stage could hold a different play. She drove her old SUV and parked at the curb. She left her phone on and set Linda to share her location because, trusting, the world did not mean forgetting the weather report. The roast looked the same. The chandelier had not learned anything. Naomi did not smile. Mother reached out a hand and drew it back as if the air had become hot. Father cleared his throat and discovered he had fewer speeches left than he thought. "We were trying to help your sister," Mother said. "The economy is unfair to young people." "The economy is unfair to everyone who expects it to be a parent," Hollis said. "And so are you when you call theft a favor." Father's mouth found a familiar shape. "You could have solved this in the family." "I did," Hollis said. "I solved it for the only part of the family I'm responsible for." Naomi stared at the tablecloth. For a moment, the theater went quiet enough to hear a fly make a choice. "I needed a win," she said at last. And there was something in the admission that did not excuse a thing, but acknowledged that wanting is a river that can drown you when you call it a bath. "You needed work," Hollis said gently. "Wins earned are the only ones that stay. I will help you with a resume. I will not help you steal." Mother's eyes shone with the easy salt of someone who has always preferred tears to apologies. "After everything we did for you, you wrote checks that totaled $600 per semester," Hollis said, not unkindly. "I kept the statements. I am not angry about that. I am grateful. But I won't pretend it was more so I'll owe you more." They ate. No one praised. The roast. Naomi put her fork down as if it were heavier than it should be. Father looked, for once, like a man who did not know which drawer held the tools. When it was over, when plates were stacked and a leftover tub clicked its lid, Hollis took a breath large enough to build a house with. "I love you," she said. "I will not let you break me to prove it. If you want to be in my life, you will respect what belongs to me. That includes my name." Mother pressed her napkin to her mouth as if about to be photographed. Father nodded once, the smallest bow a man could make to the possibility of being wrong. Naomi's eyes flicked up and held. Hollis left without asking for her car back because it had never truly left her hands. She had made sure of that. The midnight blue sedan sat where it should sit the next morning, in the company garage. She had contracted months ago when she first realized boundaries could be reinforced with concrete and a keycard. She met the tech in the cool echo of the bay and watched him install a geofencing device and a keyless immobilizer. "Any fob we don't register will be as useful as jewelry," he said. She smiled, and it felt like more than a smile. It felt like policy. At work, she issued a short, precise memo. Personal property and respect. Expectations in client-facing culture. It was not a crusade. It was a line a team could read and walk. HR asked to expand it into training. Someone in legal wrote back a paragraph with the word exemplary. When she left that night, the sky bruised itself into gorgeousness. She stood by the midnight blue car and touched the door with the gratitude other people save for altars. The passenger side shone. The scratch was long gone. The car was the least important thing she owned, and also a symbol that had learned to stand up straight. Her phone pinged with a new text from Naomi. I got a job. It's not glamorous. I start Monday. Could you look at my resume tonight? A. Beat later. I'm sorry. Hollis stared at the words long enough to be sure she wanted to accept them as a beginning and not evidence. Send it, she replied. We'll make it clean. In the months that followed, the penalties were entered into the record, the notary's suspension published on a page only notaries read. The platform updated a patch with the bland apology of a company that does not want to be sued. Her parents showed up for coffee once and did not mention cars. They asked about Linda, and when Hollis spoke about plans that had nothing to do with shared resources, their faces worked through the geometry of caring without control. It looked like learning. On a Saturday, Hollis drove the Ridge Road in daylight, alone, not to punish the past, but to see its face in good weather. She parked at milepost 37 and stood where she had been left. The wind stitched her hair against her cheek and said very simply, You brought yourself home. She set a small reflective triangle on the gravel and took a photograph, not for posting, not for proof, but for the version of herself that would one day forget that this was hard and remember only that she had always been strong. She picked up the triangle and put it back in the trunk, where it belonged, ready for emergencies that might never arrive. Back in town, she met Jenna for lunch and slid a check across the table that made gratitude a number. Jenna laughed and tried to hand it back. Hollis shook her head. Wins earned, she said, and the phrase fit in her mouth like a key that had always been hers. Later, at a coffee shop with sun on the floor, she sat with a junior colleague named Sarah, who had not yet learned how to keep her work from being treated like office property. They talked through a presentation, and Hollis suggested a slide with a title that said, What most people are afraid to say, plainly. Your achievements belong to you. Sarah swallowed, nodded, and straightened her shoulders as if she had just tried on a jacket she could afford. Evening pushed its soft hand through the blinds. Hollis drove home the long way to give herself time to think about all the doors she had closed and how that had opened rooms she didn't know her life contained. At a red light, she looked over at a bus stop where a woman a little younger than Naomi sat reading a paperback. A man a little older than father showed a toddler how to press the button without wandering into the street, and two teenagers shared a bag of chips with reverence. The world, she thought, is full of people trying not to take more than they need. Maybe her family could learn to be part of that world. Maybe they already had begun. Her building's garage received the midnight blue car like a cathedral receives. Footsteps. She parked, turned off the engine, and let the silence be holy. She rested her hands on the wheel and looked at her reflection in the black screen of the dashboard. The person looking back was plain in the best sense, undecorated by someone else's narrative. She said out loud, Because some truths deserve air. Love respects. Upstairs, she opened the laptop and added a final page to Boundaries. It was a photo of the triangle on the gravel, wind tousling the grass around it. She titled the file, Mile 37, Kept. Then she closed the computer and called her mother. I'd like to have dinner, she said. Just you and me. A place with windows. We'll talk about books. There was a pause. I'd like that, Mother said carefully, like someone placing a cup down without chipping it. I don't know what to bring. Just yourself, Hollis said. And your own name. When she hung up, the night did not feel like a corridor. It felt like a porch with a light left on. She poured water into a glass and drank until the world steadied at the height where people live everyday lives. She thought about the judge's pen, the cashier's quiet, the ride through the dark with a stranger who did not ask for her story, the small triangle that had caught the headlight of a truck that might one day be hers to help. She smiled at nothing in particular and everything in general. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.